Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome to our live commentary on Friday. I can't believe it's Friday. Can't believe it's Friday. It's as you can tell, I'm in a different location. I drove down to the Modena Bologna area because there's a beautiful art fair going on here tomorrow. And so I thought, oh, what a perfect opportunity to come visit a friend. Plus, tomorrow is the official end. In case I hadn't reported this before, I just realized that I might not have said anything about this, but tomorrow is the official end of the Epagommental days. So tomorrow, Saturday, the 3rd of February, the Epagommental days officially end. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can go over to my podcast and you can find, I believe it's like, I don't know, episode 40 or something like that, all about the Epagommental days, or you can just search in the Naturally Conscious community or on my website, actually, and you will find a beautiful article all about what are the Epagommental days, why are they so important, and why does it matter when they end. So they officially end tomorrow. And then here in Damanhur, when they end, we always have a very important ritual. It's called the ritual of the form. It's actually held as a dinner or a lunch. And it's a group ritual that we do in our families. And then there's one major, one kind of central lunch or dinner that is happening at the same time. And that is the one where, it's too hard to explain. Lots of things happen in that ritual. It's an important ritual for us. It actually happens twice a year, one at the official end of the Epagommental days. So the Epagommental days end at midnight Italian time, so Central European time, midnight on the change between Saturday to Sunday. And therefore the lunch happens tomorrow, or some groups are probably going to do dinner. And then there is on the 23rd of June is the other one. And that one always happens it's connected to the death of our spiritual teacher and founder, Falco Tarasaco. So the ritual of the form is a really important ritual for us. It's a ritual that symbolizes all kinds of stuff. I'll write up something for you at some point, or maybe I'll do a live or something where I explain all that. But anyway, so I decided to take advantage of the fact that I was coming down to the Modena Bologna area anyway to go to this art fair. And so I'm going to be having the ritual with the group from Modena, which is an awesome Modena Bologna group, which is an awesome group of people that I like, beautiful initiates that I love. And one of my bestest friends actually lives in this area too. And so, it's like a win all around. Actually, one of my closest friends, I'm her mother's spiritual heir in Damanhur. So it's kind of like a triple thing. I get to do art, I get to do ritual, and I get to catch up with my spiritual ancestor because I'm gathering up all the information about her life. So it's like a win all around. So that's why you see me in a completely different location. And isn't that clock cool? I think that is so freaking cool. It's got me. Anyway, today we are going to be talking about, so I jumped out of order because just yesterday a new article was published. And when I read this article, I was like, I have to bring this up to you. I have to. It is an article that is by Scientific America. It was literally, I found it actually on Wednesday, the 31st, but it was technically published on the 1st. So who knows what time zone, because I saw it on the 31st here, Central European time, and it said, the date says February 1st. So it is I thought that it would be good for us to do this, even though I know it's out of order. Now I wish I would have brought my ring light because I'm feeling very, very, very dark. Anyway, so I wanted to do this, even though I know it's out of order, because this paper goes to the very heart of the conversation around thinking, cognition, consciousness, and all of these types of topics. So when I read this, I just about jumped out of my seat because, let me just share the paper. Let me just share the article with you. And so that way you can understand my absolute enthusiasm for this. So hold on a second. Okay. So there it is. Okay, so now you have it here. This is the article. The article is technically labeled "Brains are not required when it comes to thinking or solving problems. Simple cells can do it." Now, I'll warn you, it is not exactly a full plant paper, although plants are mentioned and you'll see why, but it's, well, as I go through it, I only read part of it because I stopped at some point and I was like, oh my God, we have to do this. Oh my goddess, we have to do this. So, okay. I'm going to drink my tea. I'm actually really pumped right now. It's really nice to be in a new environment. And I have to say, Modena was one of the most amazing surprises when I moved to Italy. Like the first time I came down here, I fell in love with this little, like this, I guess it's a town slash, it's a city. It's a little city. And the area right around it. The place that I'm in right now, there's in the tiny town square, there's, so this region is very, very, so Bologna is known for, come on, you can all guess it, because if you're like me, you're singing the Oscar Mayer song right now. Bologna is known for mortadella, which mortadella is the true bologna. So and we're not going to get into all that history. Modena is known for the whole world of balsamic vinegar. Balsamic vinegar is really amazing. Balsamic vinegars. It's a very food and gastronomical area. Parma is in this area too, and Parma is all about Parmesan and all kinds of different aspects. Oh my gosh, this is a food heaven. So I am expecting a really good dinner tonight, because this is one of the regions of Italy where I actually like the food. Like there's just gnocco frito and all kinds. Oh yeah, it's gonna be good. Anyway, sorry, I totally distracted from the paper because I had to talk about food. But you know, food is good, so I'm not complaining about that. All right. So let's share this paper. Brains are not required when it comes to thinking and solving problems. The second part is especially important. Simple cells can do it. So this, as I was driving down here, I was listening to an old podcast episode where they were interviewing Monica Galliano on a podcast about consciousness. And I have to say, it was probably one of the best interviews I've ever heard from her. I mean, I've heard lots of interviews of her and have spoken to her about her research and such. And it's always just the kind of basics. But this time she went really deep into her research and also her process and her own self-actualization and self-realization process through which that she has, like where she's arrived thanks to this relationship with plants. And I found that part of the conversation so enlightening because it was parallel. I actually recorded an episode of the podcast before I left home today, and which is going to be coming out soon. And one of the things that I was talking about was exactly that, my own path and like all the different things I did and why I chose right now to be a coach and a mentor instead of trying to do any of those other things, which I can easily go back to and do at any point. But it was very interesting to hear about like how the plants were involved and her own sort of trust in herself that led, not trust in, let's just say trust in what she receives. So being really open to receiving both from the perspective of communications to intuitions to direction, but even monetarily. And like, I can see now how they're all connected based on where I am on my own journey. And the fact that when we really step deeper into this connection with our true nature, it makes it much easier for us to open and receive. So this article, which is talking about in its own way, cognition and consciousness, I think ties in really beautifully to this whole concept. So tiny clumps of cells show basic cognitive abilities, and some animals can remember things after losing their head. So keep in mind this design, because I think this is going to be a big one of this. Okay. The planarian is nobody's idea of a genius, a flatworm shaped like a comma. It can be found wriggling through the muck of lakes and ponds worldwide. Its pin-sized head has a microscopic structure that passes for a brain. Its two eye spots are set close together in a way that makes it look cartoonishly confused. It aspires to nothing more than life as a bottom feeder. Okay, so this phrase, by the way, is, I mean, everything else is fine. It aspires to nothing more than life as a bottom feeder. How do you know? As I was listening, remember I told you I was just listening to this article, to this podcast with Monica Galliano. She was talking about the conditioning that we have and the definitions we have, and it triggered in me something I continuously am. I find myself when I read papers or listen to really amazing scientific research, we jump to amazing conclusions that are, we don't even know whether or not they're accurate or not. And this is like, it aspires to nothing more than life as a bottom feeder. We have no idea. We have no idea. If you were to ask any human being what they aspire to, and you were to just look at them from the outside and try to understand what they aspire to, that would not necessarily tell you what they're thinking and what they aspire to. I feel like we're getting closer and closer. I also listened to I didn't get to finish the whole thing, but I will. And I might actually bring it here so that we can listen to it together, to an interview done with another science communicator. And she was talking about, paradigm shifts relating to language and the necessity for us to stop talking about plants in just scientific terms and like muscles, movement, and cells modulating and things like that, because that's not how we talk about humans. And that's what humanizes us. That's what allows us to see a human as a being that is worthy of respect and is worthy of care and all these other aspects. And I think we do need to do this with not just plants, but really with any kind of being. So I think we need to stop having a lot of these conversations that we need to stop assuming things, or at least we should, in the meantime, at least admit that we're assuming things. Anyways, that's just my rant for a second. But the worm has mastered one task that has eluded humanity's greatest minds: perfect regeneration. Tear it in half, and its head will grow a new tail, while its tail grows a new head. After a week, 2 healthy worms swim away. Growing a new head is a neat trick, but it's the tail end of the worm that intrigues Tufts University biologist Michael Levin. He studies the way bodies develop from single cells, among other things, and his research led him to suspect that the intelligence of living things lies outside of their brains to a surprising degree. Let me reread that phrase, because for our discussions relating to plants, this is a super important phrase. Okay? His research led him to suspect that the intelligence of living things lies outside their brains to a surprising degree. This is another discipline of science that is talking about the fact that intelligence is not necessarily coupled directly to the brain. This is huge. This is a really big piece of this puzzle that we talk about relating to intelligence, because if we can get mainstream science to understand this concept, then the human neurobiological area will have to start relooking at the entire conversation around plants with a different light. Anyway, substantial smarts may be in the cells of a worm's rear end, for instance. All intelligence is really collective intelligence, because every cognitive system is made of some kind of parts, Levin says. An animal that can survive the complete loss of its head was Levin's perfect test subject. In their natural state, planaria prefer the smooth and sheltered to the rough and open. Put them in a dish with a corrugated bottom and they will huddle against the rim. But in his laboratory about a decade ago, Levin trained some planaria to expect yummy bits of liver puree that he dribbled into the middle of a rigid dish. They soon lost all fear of the rough patch, eagerly crossing the divide to get the treats. He trained other worms in the same way, but in smooth dishes. Then he decapitated them all. Okay, that's kind of rude and cruel, but we're not going to get into the ethics of this right now. Levin discarded the heads at the head's end, which I think was rude. I don't think he would have discarded them. Just let them regenerate and become a new, and let them in the wild. Levin discarded the head ends and waited 2 weeks while the tail ends regrew new heads. Next, he placed the regenerated worms in corrugated dishes and dripped liver into the center. Worms that had lived in a smooth dish in their previous incarnation were reluctant to move. But worms regenerated from tails that had lived in rough dishes learned to go for the food more quickly. Somehow, despite the loss of their brains, those planaria had retained the memory of the liver reward. But how? You get it? They retained it. Isn't that awesome? This means that memory, learning, is not necessarily tied to the brain. It turns out that regular cells, not just highly specialized brain cells, such as neurons, have the ability to store information and act on it. Now, Levin has shown that the cells do so by using subtle changes in electric fields as a type of memory. These revelations have put the biologists at the vanguard of a new field called basal, I would assume, basal cognition. Maybe it is basal, but I don't know. Researchers in the burgeoning area have spotted hallmarks of intelligence, learning, memory, and problem solving. Learning, memory, and problem solving. Remember, we discussed this in every experiment relating to plants. This is what Paco Calvo, what Stefano Mancuso, what Monica Galliano, what so many others have been saying over and over and over again. Michael Martyr, what they're all trying to tell us is that learning, memory, and problem solving is not unique to the brain. Humanity might have evolved to do it in the brain, although it's not a given. I think we've just researched only in the brain. But it's now obvious that other beings do it. And now we have a direct showing of an animal that has a brain, but that doesn't necessarily use the brain for the memory and for the problem solving and the learning. So researchers in this burgeoning area have spotted hallmarks of intelligence, learning, memory, problem solving outside of the brain as well as within them. Until recently, most scientists held that true cognition arrived with the first brains 500,000 years ago. Seriously, 500,000 years ago. The planet is 3.8 billion years old, and plants have been here 470 million years. And we still think that this is all about brains? Without intricate clusters of neurons, behavior was merely a kind of reflex. But Levin and several other researchers believe otherwise. He doesn't deny that brains are awesome, paragon of the computational speed and power, but he sees the differences between cell clumps and brains as one of degree, not kind. I like this thinking because this basically is trying to say brains are just clumps of cells that have aggregated and connected in certain ways, where other parts of the body aren't in other ways. So, in fact, Levin suspects that cognition probably evolved as cells started to collaborate to carry out incredibly difficult tasks of building complex organisms and then got souped up into brains to allow animals to move and think faster, excuse me. The position is being embraced by researchers in a variety of disciplines. I wish I could see the words neurobiology here, but unfortunately I have a feeling we're still not going to see that because, this would dismantle so much of their belief systems. I mean, can you imagine if I'm a neurobiologist who has made my entire life's work around the fact that the brain is the most sophisticated, important organ in any species, and that everything happens in the brain, and all of a sudden, all of this comes out? The position is being embraced by researchers in a variety of disciplines, including roboticists such as Josh Bongard, a frequent Levin collaborator who runs the Morphology, Evolution, and Cognition Laboratory at the University of Milan. Brains were one of the most recent inventions of Mother Nature, the thing that came last, says Bongard, who hopes to build deeply intelligent machines from the bottom. Okay, we're not even going to talk about that. No more deeply intelligent machines, man. No more deeply intelligent machines. It's clear that the body matters, and then somehow you add neural cognition on top. It's the cherry on the sundae. It's not the sundae. I would even argue that it's not exactly even the cherry on the frickin' sundae. That's just my opinion. Oh, look, they have an ad for Who Gives a Crap. By the way, if you haven't tried Who Gives a Crap as like your toilet paper, go to tigrilagardenia.com/Who Gives a Crap US or UK or AU, because all three of them are there. It's like, just, I'll add it into the show notes when I publish this, because Who Gives a Crap is worth checking out. In recent years, interest in basal cognition has explored as researchers have recognized example after example of surprisingly sophisticated intelligence at work across life's kingdoms. No brain required. For artificial intelligence scientists such as Bongard, basal condition offers an escape from the trap of assuming that future intelligences must mimic the brain-centered human model. For medical specialists, real important stuff, there are tantalizing hints of ways to awaken cells' innate powers of healing and generation. Okay. This makes me so excited because, read that. For medical specialists, there are tantalizing hints of ways to awaken cells' innate powers of healing and regeneration. How often have I been telling you, how many times have I said, time and time again, that as we connect into our innate plantness, we will reawaken abilities and capabilities that we have that are within ourselves, but that we as humans have shut down. We've either been lobotomized, we've been conditioned out of, it depends on what philosophy you actually believe. But we have so many more abilities to heal and regenerate, and tapping into our plantness allows us to use a different logic to re-feel these. These are innate to us, they're there. And here science is starting to believe it, is finally starting to look in that direction. We have more powers of healing and regeneration because we have plantness within us. Therefore, all of us, we have all these cells. There's so much more we can be doing. So to me, this is extremely exciting. And for the philosophically minded, basal cognition casts the world in a sparkling new light. Well, I believe that. Maybe thinking builds from a simple start. Maybe it is happening all around us every day in forms we haven't recognized because we didn't know what to look for. Maybe minds are everywhere. I want to cut this out, and I want to like put it on my wall. Like if I ever write a book, this will be one of the quotes, right? Because this is what we in the naturally conscious community have been saying all along. This is it. We have been talking about the fact that there are so many more forms of intelligence and of mind. And so we need to think outside the box. We need to not be so cut off from our own true thinking based on this conditioning that we've been told, this lie we've been sold, that the only thing is mind is the thing that is in here. So not true. Although it now seems like the Dark Ages idea, only a few decades ago, many scientists believed that non-human animals couldn't experience pain or other emotions. Real thought, out of the question. The mind was the purview of humans. It was the last beachhead, says Pamela Leon of the University of Adelaide, a scholar of basal cognition, who coined the term for the field in 2018. This is only 2018. That is the reason why we haven't heard many papers that come out about this. But trust me, I'm going to be looking out for them now. Leon sees scientists' insistence that human intelligence is qualitatively different as just another doomed form of exceptionalism. I love Pamela already. I love you, Pamela. I love you. We've been ripped from every central position we've inhabited, she points out. Earth is not the center of the universe. People are just another animal species, but real cognition, that was supposed to set us apart. Now, the notion too is in retreat as researchers document the rich inner lives of creatures increasingly distant from us. Apes, dogs, dolphins, crows, even insects are proving more savvy than suspected. In his 2022 book, The Mind of a Bee, behavioral ecologist Lars Chipka chronicles his decades of work with honeybees, showing that bees can use sign language, recognize individual human faces, and remember and convey the locations of far-flung flowers. They have good moods and bad, and they can be traumatized by near-death experience, such as being grabbed by an animatronic spider hidden in a flower. Who wouldn't be? Agreed. And this actually got me to thinking. Today, I was listening to some of these podcasts as I was driving down to Bologna. There was even those of us that are more aware, doesn't mean we don't still have our biases and have our like shadow areas. Trust me, I come across them all the time. For example, in this particular case, even Monica Galliano herself, who is somebody who's extremely open to so many concepts relating to the plants, was talking about how after she was saying in her experiment with Mimosa pudica, the one where the Mimosa pudica, she shows habituation and learning from the mimosa being dropped from a height over time. She talks about the fact that in that, she always specifies in her experiments that no plants were harmed during this experiment. And they were joking, which I think she had never really thought of the trauma. Like, who says that plant doesn't have a form of trauma from that experience? We assume that because we don't see a physical harm, there is no quote unquote psychological harm. But if we are arguing for cognition, if we are arguing for consciousness or for anything, we cannot assume that there is no harm. Just the same as the planaria that keep getting cut in half. We cannot assume that there's no trauma, that there's nothing at all. I am not saying that we should stop experimenting because of this. That's not what I'm saying exactly. I'm saying I don't know, and I prefer to enter the space from a place of I don't know than to enter the space from a place of this isn't happening. Because if it keeps saying it's not happening, then we're just perpetuating more areas and more nuances of the same lie that we're trying to change in the first place. So I think we have to open ourselves to the fact that it is possible that in our desire and our quest to show cognition, we are creating trauma on the way, which, to be honest, we've done this with humans too. I mean, there's plenty of, every day we hear of some experiment from the past that has shown something that we did that was horrible, that we would never do today, to children, separating children at birth, to all kinds of different things. And there is absolutely no excuse for those types of things other than ignorance. And at the time, it was ignorance. So we still have ignorance relating to the plants. But as we become more aware, not only is the conversation have to shift around our clothing and our food choices and all these different things and our complete relationship with plants, we're going to have to talk about how we do science too. And I think this is good. This is another one of those freaky ass things that is like the neurobiology, human neurobiology departments are going to struggle with. But not only them, I mean, all kinds of biologists. But bees, of course, are animals with actual brains. So the soupçon of smarts doesn't really shake the paradigm. The bigger challenge comes from evidence of surprisingly sophisticated behavior in our brainless relatives. The neuron is not a miracle cell, says Stefano Mancuso, a University of Florence botanist who has written several books on plant intelligence. Mancuso. I should go down to Florence and go visit. I haven't been down there in a while. I think we're getting close to a nice visit. It's a normal cell that is able to produce an electrical signal. In plants, almost every cell is able to do that. Exactly. Like this whole electrical response is something that is common to plants, and it's how neurons work. Hence the whole discussion of plant neurobiology, which they stay away from here. And I'm glad that they do. They actually don't talk about neurobiology in any way, shape, or form in this article, at least not from up until what I was reading. And I think that's a smart thing to do, because I think it would take us in a different direction. On one plant, the touch-me-not, feathery leaves normally fold and wilt. This is the Mimosa pudica. When touched, a defense mechanism against being eaten. But when a team of scientists from the University of Western Australia, Monica Galliano, and the University of Firenze, Mancuso's team, in Italy, conditioned the plant by jostling it through the day without harming it. This is the whole without harming it part. This is the same thing she was saying in this podcast. And I was like, I don't know about without harming, okay? Without physically harming. I think they need to qualify. It quickly learned to ignore the stimulus. Most remarkably, when the scientists left the plant alone for a month and then retested it, he remembered the experience. Other plants must have other abilities. A Venus flytrap can count, snapping shut only if 2 of the sensory hairs on its trap are tripped in quick succession, and pouring digestive juices into the closed trap only if its sensory hairs are tripped 3 more times. That's a lot of counting. That's a lot of counting for someone that doesn't have a brain. These responses in plants are mediated by electric signals, just as they are in animals. Plant neurobiology, anyone? Wire a fly trap to a touch-me-not, and you can make the entire touch-me-not collapse by touching a sensory hair on the fly trap. And these and other plants can be knocked out by anesthetic gas. This was the research that I think I've also done here, as well as was identified in Paco Calvo's book, Planta Sapiens. It's one of the first research studies that he presents in the book. Their electric activity flatlines and they stop responding as if unconscious. Plants can sense their surroundings surprisingly well. They know whether they are being shaded by part of themselves or by something else. They can detect the sound of running water and will grow towards it. And bees' wings will, this is another one of Monica's research, and the bees' wings and will produce nectar in preparation. This is out of the University of Israel of Tel Aviv. They know when they are being eaten by bugs and will produce a nasty defense chemical in response. This, on the other hand, is, there's just so many research. I've done a bunch of these papers I've actually reviewed here for you. So you can just go back through the old ones if you don't know this research. They even know when their neighbors are under attack. When scientists played a recording of munching caterpillars to a cress plant, this is research from the US, that was enough for the plant to send a surge of mustard oil into its leaves. Plants' most remarkable behavior tends to get underappreciated because we see it every day. They seem to know exactly what form they have, plan their future growth based on sights, sounds, and smells around them, making complicated decisions about where future resources and dangers might be located in ways that can't be boiled down to simple formulas. As Paco Calvo, director of the Minimal Intelligence, I hate that name. I still hate the name that he called it Minimal Intelligence. I mean, I think it's the equivalent of basal cognition. I mean, it's all about the basics. And I guess it's not really a bad thing. It just minimizes it. Anyways, but that's me. As Paco Calvo, director of the Minimal Intelligence Laboratory at the University of Murcia in Spain, and author of Plants of Sapiens, puts it, plants have to plan ahead and to achieve goals. And to do so, they need to integrate vast pools of data. They need to engage with their surroundings adaptively and proactively, and they need to think about the future. They just can't afford to do otherwise. None of this implies that plants are geniuses, but none of it says that they're not. I still don't understand what that phrase even means, but within their limited tool set, they show a solid ability to perceive their world and use this information to get what they need. Key components of intelligence. This is what I hate. We have to still downplay it, and I don't understand why. Why can we not be in wonder and awe, and why can we not really compare them apples to apples, humans to plants in a lot of ways? Why do we have to keep saying they have limited tools, they have limited this, they have, who says that? Anyway, but again, plants are a relatively easy case. No brains, but lots of complexity and trillions of cells to play with. That's not the situation for single-celled organisms, which have traditionally been relegated to mindless category by virtually everyone. If amoebas can think, then humans need to rethink all kinds of assumptions. Ah, hope. Ah, hope. Yet the evidence for cogitating pond scum grows daily. That's an awesome slime. It's awesome. Consider the slime mold, a cellular puddle that looks a bit like melted Velveeta and oozes through the world's forest, digesting dead plant matter. Although it can be the size of a throw rug, a slime mold is one single cell with many nuclei. It has no nervous system, yet is an excellent problem solver. When researchers from Japan and Hungary placed the slime mold at one end of a maze and a pile of oat flakes at the other, the slime mold did what slime mold do, exploring every possible option for tasty resources. But once it found the oat flakes, it retreated from all the dead ends and concentrated its body in the path that led to the oats, choosing the shortest route through the maze of 4 possible solutions every time. Inspired by that experiment, the same researchers then piled oat flakes around a slime mold in positions and quantities meant to represent the population structure of Tokyo. And the slime mold contorted itself into a very passable map of the Tokyo subsystem. This subway system one is really amazing to watch. It's been cited 1,000,000,001 times. There's really no new research, which is the part about this that is so amazing and hysterically funny if you think about it in a super ironic way, is that there is no research here. All of this is old research that we have been talking about for at least 10, 15, sometimes even up to 20 years. And yet now they're putting the freaking pieces together. It's both infuriating and super exciting all at the same time. I mean, again, I have to be excited because that's kind of like, I have to be, but it is infuriating in its own way. So brains or brain cells are not the only cells grouping in the body that show the ability to think. Living robots called xenobots have been constructed from skin and heart cells taken from the African clawed frog. The frog genus is Xenopus, hence the name. And even when arranged in forms not found in nature, the cells can interpret their environment and share enough information to accomplish simple goals, such as moving in a particular direction. Scary, the idea of like robotic cells. But then again, I still think that the evolution of humans is transhumanism. Somebody's going to have to try to talk me out of this, but I actually think that the way we're going to evolve is through a lot of this different transhumanism. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but you can, see it. Such problem solving could be dismissed as simple algorithms, but other experiments make it clear that slime molds can learn. When Audrey Dussutour of France's National Center for Scientific Research placed dishes of oatmeal on the far end of a bridge lined with caffeine, which slime molds find disgusting. I like how they use the word disgusting. I don't just dislike it, they disgusting. Slime molds were stymied for days, searching for ways across the bridge, like an arachnophobe trying to scooch past a tarantula. Eventually, they got so hungry that they went for it, passing over the caffeine and feasting on the delicious oatmeal. And soon they lost all aversion to the formerly distasteful stuff. They had overcome their inhibitions and learned from the experience, and they retained the memory even after being put into a state of suspended animation for a year. And yet, no brain, single cell, a little bit of memory there. Where the hell is that coming from? Which brings us back to decapitated planaria. How could something without a brain remember anything? Where is the memory stored? Where is its mind? You have a planaria, little wormy type thing, cut in half, and both sides regenerate and both sides hold memory. One side didn't have a mind, it was just an ass. And it knows, so maybe the idea that, memory is stored in your ass, I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I'm a little spicy today. It's the tea. This is a spicy tea. It's very good. The orthodox view of memory is that it is stored as a stable network of synaptic connections among neurons in the brain. Maybe in humans, maybe partially, but not everything. That view, and actually can't be everything, because we've had people with traumatic brain injuries that have just shown us so many other things. That view is clearly cracking, Levin says. Some of the demolition work has come from the lab of neuroscientists. We finally got into I didn't get this far. We finally got to the neuroscientists. But this sounds good because he's demolition work. David Glansman of the University of California, Los Angeles. Glansman was able to transfer a memory of an electric shock from one sea slug, we don't cause trauma at all, to another by extracting RNA from the brain of shocked slugs and injecting it into the brain of new slugs. One day we will realize just how cruel we are. The recipient then remembered to recoil from the touch that preceded the shock. If RNA can be a medium of memory storage, any cell might have the ability, not just neurons. Indeed, there's no shortage of possible mechanisms by which collections of cells might be able to incorporate experience. All cells have lots of adjustable pieces in their cytoskeletons and gene regulatory networks that can be set up in different conformations and can inform behavior later on. In the case of the decapitated planaria, scientists still don't know for sure, but perhaps the remaining bodies were storing information in their cellular interiors that could be communicated to the rest of the body as it were rebuilt. Perhaps their nerves' basic response to rough floors had already been altered. Levin, though, thinks something even more intriguing is going on. Perhaps the impression was stored not just within the cells, but in their states of interaction through bioelectricity. Here's the thing about this that got me really excited when I started to read that they were talking about the fact of bioelectricity. This also helps to explain why the music of the plants works. When people try to tell me that the music of the plants is just random sounds, this is why it's not random sounds. Because plants use electricity, electrical signals in ways that we humans are only now just starting to understand. Therefore, if the bioelectricity is what holds, and it's possible that it holds memory, then it makes sense that the plants can use those biosignals to communicate in more precise ways, learning how to turn those signals. When they learn that their signals are being turned into the notes of music, and we already know they can hear, then it makes sense that when they hear, they are able to then say, oh, well, this reaction, this electrical signal created that note of music, and the electrical signals also contain their memories. So this explains much of the conversation and the communication that's happening through the Music of the Plants device, and the fact that that Music of the Plants gives the plants the ability to communicate with humans in another way. Mind blown. Like, this is the direction. The subtle currents that course through all living things. Levin has spent much of his career studying how cell collectives communicate to solve sophisticated challenges during morphogenesis, or bodybuilding, how they work together to make limbs and organs in exactly the right places. Part of that answer seems to lie in bioelectricity. The fact that bodies have electricity flickering through them has been known for centuries. But until quite recently, most biologists thought it was mostly used to deliver signals. Shoot some current through the frog's nervous system and the frog's leg kicks. Neurons used bioelectricity to transmit information, but most scientists believe that it was a speciality of brains, not bodies. Since the 1930s, however, a small number of researchers have observed that other types of cells seem to be using bioelectricity to store and share information. Levin immersed himself in the unconventional body of work that made the next cognitive leap. Drawing on his background in computer science, he supported himself during school by writing code, and he knew that computers used electricity to toggle their transistors between 0 and 1, and that all computer programs were built up from that binary foundation. So as an undergraduate, when he learned that all cells in the bodies have channels in their membranes that act like voltage gates, allowing different levels of current to pass through them, he immediately saw that such gates could function like transistors, and that cells could use this electricity-driven information processing to coordinate their activities. To find out whether voltage changes really altered the way that cells pass information to one another, Levi turned to his planaria farm. In the 2000s, he designed a way to measure the voltage at any point on the planarian and found different voltages on the head and tail ends. When he used drugs to change the voltage of the When he used drugs to change the voltage tail to that normally found in the head, the worm was unfazed. But when cut the planarian in two and the head end regrew a second head instead of a tail. Remarkably, when Levin cut the new worm in half, both heads grew new heads. This whole mutant worm thing is a little scary. Although the worms were genetically identical to normal planaria, the one-time change in voltage resulted in permanent two-headed states. For more confirmation that bioelectricity could control body shape and growth, Levin turned to African clawed frogs. Let's traumatize another species. Common lab animals that quickly metamorphose from egg to tadpole to adult. He found that he could trigger the creation of a working eye anywhere on a tadpole by inducing a particular voltage in that spot. We are really beasts as human beings. I could never, by simply applying the right bioelectric signature to a wound for 24, I have a problem lately with when I have a fruit fly in my house and I accidentally, instinctively go to squish, I feel like crap. I feel like crap. And I'm like, how can I get the fruit fly out of my house? Which is really hard, by the way. Fruit flies are just not exactly wrangleable. But the point being is now I'm just like, okay, fine. It's just not create the conditions in which fruit flies grow. So minimize that. But how do these people do this? By simply applying the right bioelectric signature to a wound for 24 hours, he can induce regeneration of a functional leg. Okay, that's a positive thing. The cells get from there. It's a subroutine call, Levin. Don't kind of talk about the human body as if it's just a computer. It's a subroutine call, Levin says. It's in computer programming, a subroutine call is a piece of code, a kind of shorthand that tells a machine to initiate a whole suite of lower-level mechanical actions. The beauty of this higher level of programming is that it allows us to control billions of circuits without having to open up the machine and mechanically alter each one by hand. And that was the case with building tadpole eyes. No one had to micromanage the construction of lenses, retinas, and all other parts of an eye. It could all be controlled at the level of bioelectricity. It's literally the cognitive glue. Bioelectricity. Bioelectricity. What we've been using for the music of the plants since the beginning. What Baxter used when he worked on his experiments for the secret lives of plants. What so many of the neurobiologists have been arguing is unique to the neuron. No. Levin says it's allowed groups of cells to work together. Levin believes this discovery could have profound implications, not only for our understanding of the evolution of cognition, but also for human medicine. Learning to speak cell, to coordinate cells' behavior through bioelectricity, might help us treat cancer, a disease that occurs when a part of the body stops cooperating with the rest of the body. Normal cells are programmed to function as part of the collective, sticking to the tasks assigned. Liver cells, skin cell, and so on. But cancer cells stop doing their job and begin treating the surrounding body like an unfamiliar environment, striking out on their own to seek nourishment, replicate and defend themselves from attack. In other words, they act like independent organisms. Why do they lose their group identity? In part, Levin says, because the mechanisms that maintain the cellular mind meld can fail. Stress, chemicals, genetic mutation can all cause a breakdown of this communication. Stress, chemicals, genetic mutations. The building blocks of life for most humans. Well, maybe not the genetic mutations part, but for sure the stress and chemicals part, like crazy. His team has been able to induce tumors in frogs just by forcing a bad bioelectric pattern into a healthy tissue. It's as if cancer cells stop receiving their orders and go rogue. Even more tantalizingly, Levin has dissipated tumors, this is a positive, by reintroducing the proper bioelectric pattern, in effect, reestablishing communication between the breakaway cancer and the body, as if he's bringing a sleeper cell back into the fold. That's a really good analogy. That doesn't seem like a good analogy to me. Anyway, at some point in the future, he speculates, bioelectricity therapy might be applied to human cancers, stop tumors from growing. It also could play a role in regenerating failing organs, kidneys, say, or hearts. If scientists can crack the bioelectric code that tells cells to start growing in the right patterns, I wonder if it's unique to each person. It's just me thinking out loud. Like, I can totally see this being useful, and I think we could learn a lot from plants in this perspective, but I wonder also if it's like, is it something that's generic, or is it something used independent or individualized per person. With tadpoles, in fact, Levin showed that animals suffering from massive brain damage at birth were able to build normal brains after a right shot of bioelectricity. Levin's research has always had tangible applications, such as cancer therapy, limb regeneration, and wound healing. All right, I can see this. But over the past few years, he's allowed a philosophical current to enter his papers and talks. Now, interesting. It's been a sort of slow rollout, he confesses. I've had these ideas for decades, but it wasn't the right time to talk about it. Now I'm curious. That being the change with a celebrated 2019 paper entitled The Computational Boundary of a Self, in which he harnessed the results of his experiments to argue that we are all collecting intelligences built out of smaller, highly competent problem-solving agents. As Vermont's Bongard told the New York Times, what we are is intelligent machines made of intelligent machines made of intelligent machines all the way down. This is interesting. For Levin, the realization came in part from watching the bodies of his clawed frogs as they developed. In frogs' transformation from tadpole to adult, their faces undergo massive remodeling. The head changes shape, and the eyes, mouth, and nostrils all migrate to new positions. The common assumption has been that these rearrangements are hardwired and follow simple mechanical algorithms carried out by genes. But Levin suspected it wasn't preordained. So he electrically scrambled the normal development of frog embryos to create tadpoles with eyes, nostrils, and mouths in all the wrong places. Levin dubbed them Picasso tadpoles, and they truly looked the part. Poor babies. If the remodeling were pre-programmed, the final frog face should have been If remodeling were pre-programmed, the final frog face should have been as messed up as tadpole. Should it not have been? Anyway, nothing in the frog's evolutionary past gave it genes for dealing with such a novel situation. Oh, but Levin watched in amazement as the eyes and mouths found their way to the right arrangement while the tadpoles morphed into frogs. The cells had an abstract goal and worked together to achieve it. This is intelligence in action. Oh, okay. So he's saying that sorry, I misunderstood this. The tadpole face was all like screwed up because he messed up those cells. Nothing, the bioelectricity of those cells, but nothing in the frog's evolutionary gave it, even though the genes don't know how to deal with this stuff, the actual frogs all found their right way from tadpole to frog. The cells had an abstract goal and worked together to achieve it. The intelligence is in action. Levin wrote, the ability to reach a particular goal or solve a problem by undertaking new steps in the face of changing circumstances. Fused into a hive mind through bioelectricity, the cells achieve feats of bioengineering well beyond those of our best gene jockeys. That makes sense. Some of the most intense interest in Levin's work comes from the fields of artificial intelligence or robotics. Of course it would. Which see in basal cognition a way to address some core weaknesses. For all their remarkable prowess in manipulating language or playing games with well-defined rules, AI still struggle immensely to understand the physical world. They can churn out sonnets in the style of Shakespeare, but ask them how to walk or to predict how a ball will roll down the hill, and they are clueless. According to Bongards, that's because AIs are, in a sense, too heady. If you play with these AIs, you can start to see where the cracks are, and they tend to be around things like common sense and cause and effect, which points towards why you need a body. If you have a body, you can learn about cause and effect because you can cause effects. But these AI systems can't learn about the world by poking at it. Bongarde is at the vanguard of the embodied cognition movement, which seeks to design robots and learn about their world by monitoring the way their form interacts with it. For example of an embodied cognition, I wonder if they're going to talk about plantoids at some point. Because plantoids is a type of robot that's based on the plant body because it does exactly that. It acts more like a root that grows, so it expands from the root tip, exploring the land and therefore making decisions on which direction and how to grow. For an example of embodied cognition in action, he says, look no further than a 1.5-year-old child who is probably destroying the kitchen right now. That's what toddlers do. They poke the world, literally and metaphorically, and then watch how the world pushes back. It's relentless. Bongarde's lab uses AI programs to design robots, flexible Lego-like cubes that he calls Minecraft robotics. The cubes act like blocky muscles, allowing the robots to move their bodies like caterpillars. The AI-designed robots learn by trial and error, adding and subtracting cubes and evolving into more mobile forms as the worst design gets eliminated. Makes sense. In 2020, Bongarde's AI discovered how to make robots walk. That accomplishment inspired Levin's lab to use microsurgery to remove live skin stem cells from African cloud frogs and nudge them together in water. The cells fused into a lump the size of a sesame seed and acted as a unit. Skin cells have cilia, tiny hairs that typically hold a layer of protective mucus on the surface of an adult frog. But these creations used their cilia like oars, rowing through their new world. They navigated mazes and even closed up wounds when injured. Freed from their confined existence in a biological cubicle, they became something new and made the best of their situation. Without a brain, They definitely weren't frogs, despite sharing the identical genome, but because the cells originally came from the frog of the genus Xenopus, Levin and Bongard nicknamed these things xenobots. In 2023, they showed similar feats could be achieved by pieces of another species, human lung cells. Clumps of the human cells self-assembled and moved around in specific ways. The Tufts team named them anthrobots, because we really need anthrobots. To Levin, the xenobots and anthrobots are another sign that we need to rethink the way cognition plays out in the actual world. You think we have been saying this for years. We've been telling you this. Typically, when you ask about a given living thing, you ask, why does it have the shape it has? Why does it have the behaviors it had? And the standard answer is evolution, of course. For eons, it was selected for. Well, guess what? There have never been any xenobots. There's never been any pressure to be a good xenobot. So why do these things do with that what they do within 24 hours of finding themselves in the world? I think it's because evolution does not produce specific solutions to specific problems. It produces problem-solving machines, which is what a plant is, a problem-solving machine. Xenobots and anthrobots are, of course, quite limited in their capabilities, but perhaps they provide a window into how intelligence might naturally scale up when individual units with certain goals and needs come together to collaborate. Levin sees this innate tendency towards innovation as one of the driving forces of evolution, pushing the world towards a state of, as Charles Darwin might have put it, endless forms most beautiful. I love that, because it is true. I need to do a whole thing about beauty in the perspective of the way Charles Darwin was talking about it there. Remind me of this. I need to do this. We don't really have a good vocabulary for it yet. I know, which is why we want a whole new expansion of vocabulary. He says, but I honestly believe that the future of all this is going to look more like psychiatry talk than chemistry talk. We're going to end up having a calculus of pressures and memories and attractions. Agreed. Levin hopes the vision will help us overcome our struggle with knowledge minds that come in packages bearing little resemblance to our own. Yes, yes, yes. Whether they are made of slime or silicone or plant matter. For Adelaide's Leon, recognizing that kinship is the real promise of basal cognition. We think we are the crown of creation, she says, but if we start realizing that we have a whole lot more in common with blades of grass and the bacteria in our stomachs, that we are related at a really, really deep level, it changes the entire paradigm of what it is to be a human being on this planet. Yes, we are more closely connected to plants, to rocks, to other species than we even understand today. Indeed, the very act of living is by default a cognitive state, Leon says. Every cell needs to be constantly evaluating its surroundings, making decisions about what to let in, what to keep out, and planning its next step. Cognition didn't arrive later in evolution. It's what made life possible. Every species that's alive is doing amazing things, Leon points out. If an airplane could do that, it would be in its fuels and raw materials from the outside world while manufacturing not just its components, but also the machines it needs to make those components and doing repairs, all while it's flying. What we do is nothing short of a miracle. Wow. Wow, I like this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here that's scary as hell. A lot. But seriously, really, really fascinatingly interesting. So Berg says, I can't help but think about how scientists are often the bad guys in comics and movies. And there's a reason. Like, when you get so used to dealing with plants in this way, I'm not plants, sorry, just anything in the lab, any being, you lose sight of the fact that that being is alive. And I think the same thing can be said about agriculture. The same thing could be said about certain aspects of, I think you see this a lot in agriculture. More you see it in agriculture than you do in animal husbandry, although you do also see it in animal husbandry at times. But I think we just forget in a lot of aspects. But anyways, I thought that that was a fascinating paper. I am looking forward to having more conversations. I'm going to keep an eye out for more stuff about basal cognition because it's a whole new area that I didn't know about. And I think that it could be really useful for our research. So in this horribly bad lighting, I say goodbye to you. I am off to, well, actually, I have to take care of a few details here, and then I will be off to dinner with my friends. And I am really looking forward to hearing your feedback and your thoughts about this, because I think that this really opens up a whole new discussion on the idea of cognition, and it really brings plants, especially with the bioelectricity, to a whole new level of understanding and appreciation that I think could crack open a bigger discussion about the interactions and the way that we work, the way that we not just study, but also the way that we interact with the plant world. So I'm looking forward to your thoughts, and that's it for me for today. I am so happy that you were here. If you're watching the replay, thank you. Please leave your comments, and we will see each other soon. Bye.